Hi, I'm Chris Grimm, founder, coach, principal consultant of Aria Consulting. For 24 years, we've been serving leaders and their teams around the world. This podcast, which I wanted to call The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, but is called And Then I, is nothing scripted, nothing fancy. I promise that we'll be talking about successes and failures. It's the gold, I call it, that you find only in real stories with real leaders in real time. With that, I invite you to sit back, soak up the wisdom here of these everyday superheroes. Enjoy. Hi, everybody. It's me, Chris Grimm, and this is And Then I. Thank you for being with us. I'm thrilled today to introduce you to Jennifer Bach, who I met now just a few months ago on a visit to the Big Island of Hawaii while we're getting ready to do some intensive retreats. And I'm so compelled by what Jenny does and her life, her business. And so I want to introduce you to Jenny, and I'm going to actually ask her to give you her background because I can't really do it justice. And then you'll start to be as enamored as me, I'm sure. So welcome, Jennifer. Jenny, right? You go by Jenny.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate being on your podcast, and thanks for inviting me. So I am a Hawaii-born resident. I grew up here on the islands. My parents are not from here. My mom's from Canada, and my dad is from the continent of America, California. He's been from a few different states. But they came here in their early 20s and met each other and didn't leave, kind of that fun love story, and raised their children here. And so we are kind of like the first generation of our family being from here. It has been magical and beautiful and hard at all the same times. A mixture of family trauma, and we were raised in a religious environment. So I feel like some of those morals and ethics have really been helpful in my own personal life, but I've also broken free from that. And I also grew up in a very rural towns where I was one of maybe 4 Caucasian students. So many different diversities of growing up, and also just being in a place where my color and my background was not necessarily welcomed in some of these towns. So it was a unique way of growing up. And I also have a lot of respect for that, being in that role as well.
Wait, so you tell us what did your parents do? Like, what was
So my mom was more of a homemaker and took care of the kids, and my dad is a captain, and he was a fisherman for years, and then he owned his own scuba dive business for most of the rest of his later career. So he would cater to tourism and bringing people on charters and scuba diving businesses. So we got to grow up on boats and near the ocean. And it was really, that was a really magical part of living here, is being, just immersed in that whole ocean culture. So as I got older, I realized I wanted to see more of the world than just these islands. So I left to see more islands. I went to the South Pacific, and growing up on boats, I sailed through the South Pacific and checked out Australia, Tahiti, Indonesia, and kind of came back to the islands with a little more well-roundedness of my next direction, which was to go to school. I wanted to pursue a degree in biology, and I was a little bit lost at that time for sure. And I was renting a little cabin in the south of the island, South Puna, and there was a beehive in my yard. And I didn't think about bees, I didn't think about gardening. I was more of a surfer, ocean person. And then all of a sudden, a friend who's like this amazing man came, and he's a good friend of mine. He's like, "Oh my God, there's a beehive in your yard. We need to go and open that beehive up," because it was abandoned. And I was like, "Oh, I guess so, if you got the gear, and why not? That sounds interesting." And from the moment that he opened that hive and cracked the lid open, like the sound and the smell and the vibration was so intoxicating that I literally felt like my life changed. And I know it sounds kind of cliche, but there was like this pivot in my life where I was like, wait a minute, what is going on here? Like, this is something that I'm like, really, it felt like I was under a spell, like I was put under a spell.
Wow.
There's this ancient like saying, and I really do believe this more and more so, and the more that I'm watching what's happening now, is that the ancient saying is that the bees find their keepers. It's not really the other way around, like the people find the bees. It's like the bees find who they want to care for them. And I kind of felt like maybe they're like, enticing me into their world. And it felt that way. And I really also really enjoyed that moment. And I like thinking about this, Chris. So thank you for like inspiring the question, because this, these moments of pivot in your life, or if you want to call them transformation or life destiny, are really powerful moments to contemplate, because they don't happen that often, at least not for me. I can think meeting the bees for the first time was a pivot or a life direction. The other time was becoming a parent, becoming a mother. And those two life directions totally took me into a different path than I would ever have expected or imagined. And I'm really thankful for it. So I've been a beekeeper for almost 20 years. I started taking bees out of people's houses. Wild bees will move into houses or abandoned cars or old tree stumps. And me and my boyfriend at the time would go and take these bees out of people's houses and those areas. And I was able to learn working with these colonies that were not really, they weren't manipulated by humans that much, because they were wild. So I was able to really kind of have this understanding in my early beekeeping career of what natural colony dynamics look like, the natural biology. And I feel like that really helped me in my life with them. And I tried to make an actual commercial business with their products. After getting the bees out of the people's houses, we will put them into domesticated hives on properties and then harvest honey and things like that. And I did that for quite a while, and it did not feel aligned, or pono, as in we say pono, which is like a righteous feeling. It did not feel righteous or good. So
Wait, can we just stop for a second? Because
yeah.
I love this so much. And I know there are going to be people who watch this and listen to this, and we have to pause because
Yes.
wild bees, going to get them in someone's house, going to get them. Can you just tell us a little bit about what that looks and feels like? Because
Yeah.
I am guessing most people who are going to watch and listen to this have no idea what that is.
So bees will naturally do something called swarming, which is where they reproduce and they break off from their mother colony. With the old queen will take 50 to 70% of the colony with her and leave her daughter queens in their original home. And so that colony will swarm and find the best suited house or home that is like basically a dry cavity where they can build their nest. And so because bees evolved in forests for millions of years, where there was like dead trees and dead, like hollowed out trees, we don't have that much of that as much anymore. And the next best thing is a house in between your siding or your drywall. It's so they move in between, your siding and of your outside of your house. If there's a small hole, they can crawl through, and then they can make a beautiful nest between the wall, basically.
Right.
And so you are hired to take them out, keep everybody safe. So we go in, we have bee smokers. We usually are geared up, and then we have a tool called a bee vacuum, which is a converted vacuum that sucks up the bees alive. It uses very gentle suction, and then we are cutting the comb out, cutting the nest out piece by piece, looking for the queen. And then we try to get as many bees as possible, always try to get the queen. And then once we find the queen, we can put her into a cage, and her pheromone will therefore attract the rest of the colony, her daughters, and it becomes easy to move them from that point on. So yeah, that's kind of what it feels like and what what the gist of the job is. Some colonies, they're not really excited to have you tear apart their home.
I was
and they-
imagining there were, I think I've seen that before, because here, most of the time, what you are describing here being, I'm in California, people usually treat it like a problem.
yeah, it is. I mean, there for many years, the people will spray them and poison them, and people still do, but there is more and more of a common understanding that we need honeybees for our food supply, and we rely on them. So I hope that the consciousness is changing, that if you do have that problem, you call a beekeeper versus like using a poison, which doesn't work that well anyway. It's really good to remove the whole colony piece by piece. It was really a cool understanding of working with them. And I have to say, and this may alarm some of your listeners, but like there was a point in this beekeeping career or destiny where working with them, they definitely sting you. And I was getting stung a lot in my early career, and like, I had a lot of swelling and itching and things like that. And I just really got this message, like, it's okay. The stings are good. The stings are medicine. And I swear, like, I'd get stung a lot in some of these jobs, go home exhausted, all drippy with honey, take a shower, go to bed, and have these elaborate dreams about honeybees and like me becoming one in the nest. And it was like profound. I was like, what the hell's going on? Like, am I like just getting too many stings? And then I started to realize like there's something going on. I need to research this more. I thought it was a little bit like I was going crazy. And then I realized, wait a minute, there's this whole shamanic ancient practice related to honeybees. There was temples dedicated to honeybees and Delphi and the goddesses and the priestesses. And in Greece, wait, what's going on? But all these cultures around the world, like, had reverence for them and like held them high in society. Many cultures did. And I just, started really diving into like that spiritual shamanic practice of it. And I swear, for me, a lot of it came through the stinging themselves of their venom mixing with my DNA. And there was some kind of like cosmic switch where I was like, okay, I'm listening. And
Like, it's profound. And, a lot of people who watch and listen to this podcast are people who might know me and Aria Consulting from corporate business situations. And I think there is an important lesson here, like you were saying, around feeling the call, going towards something. And the reason I'm saying there's like a lesson here for business is that a lot of people quit when the pain comes. And, so you seeing it as the medicine, right? This is the lesson. It's telling me I have to go deeper and learn more. I can apply that to so many situations where I'm coaching people, Jenny. Like, it doesn't matter if it's like, this sounds weird, but if someone's called to do a certain part of a business, the first few years, usually there's pain, right? Like, you get stung. People don't like you. You don't maybe understand the business. There's a whole bunch of things that happen. And most people, if they don't have the wisdom of what is my calling, this is maybe, getting away from the concept of a job. And when I'm coaching people, I spend a lot of time talking with people because so many people are just miserable, right? Like, their job is a job. And until they find the thing that awakens some passion in them, the pain won't be worth it, right? Like, it doesn't lead you down the path that actually helps you be the best at something. So I don't want to take that for granted. I'm so happy that you shared that. Of course, I'm not surprised when you said people might be shocked by it, because that was kind of my big question. Is I'm like, okay, wild bees, mad bees. Most likely you weren't going to just whisper them straight out and first day, everything's fine. So, I mean, bravo to you for, heeding the call, right?
Yeah, it felt like someone had to do the job. And I felt like the overarching thought of like taking wild bees out of people's houses was as saving them. And I would try to like convey that in my energy and in my mind, because I didn't want them to get poisoned. But yeah, there's harsh learning curves, I think, whichever and whatever business you do. And it took a long time to really understand bees. And 20 years now, I'm like, wow, thank goodness I had courage to really go for it, because it took a long time to understand it. And also it took a long time for me to realize that I wasn't going crazy, and that there may be something else here on that other spectrum of like, oh, there's something deeper here that I need to go into. Yeah, so I wasn't very successful with the honey business because I felt not aligned, and I felt like I didn't have integrity with it, because I didn't like what I was doing to the bees and like commercializing them. And I'm not saying that all beekeepers do this who do honey. There's a lot of amazing beekeepers who are amazing, who work and, you know, sell their products. But I just felt, for me personally, that wasn't really my path. And I was confused, because I'm like, well, I want to work with you, but I don't really want to do that. And it's really hard work. It's really like heavy work, and you're sweating and you're getting stung. And I'm like, what do you want me to do? And so I started kind of like asking that question to them, and on an esoteric spiritual level. Maybe that was some of my past religious, praying, like asking God for help. And I swear I heard them, or some voice, or God, or the bees say, if you want to help us, teach people to love us. And I was like, okay, I hear that. So I started to write grants. I never wrote a grant before. And this is many years ago, 2008, I started writing grants. And I started getting them. And the programs that I was asking to be funded were to put bees in schools, to teach children about bees, to teach high schoolers how to become beekeepers. And we started getting funding. And fast forward now, 2023, we've been working since 2009, and we have a robust program called the Honeybee Education Program. That's completely a nonprofit program. And we teach farmers and adults and Hawaii Island residents to become beekeepers so they can integrate it on their own farm. We are working with high schoolers and putting bee hives on campus, which is, a big, I think that's a unique thing, because bees equal like scared, or, it also can equal like death if you're allergic, but we find ways to keep it all safe and work with the schools. And then we do beekeeping field trips and education programs. And it's changed over the years towards legislative work and educating county and state workers about the use of pesticides and herbicides and the effects on honeybees. We're now getting into community garden work and growing pollinator gardens and trying to build food resiliency for communities. So it's kind of blossomed into this whole other aspect of work. And I feel really blessed, because it's exactly what I want to do. I love eating honey, and I love harvesting it for me and my family and friends, but I love this because I can really like share the love of honeybees, which is what they sounded like they wanted me to do. And here I am, and we've been successful doing it. So yeah,
look, we cannot take it for granted. There's so much. This is why I wanted to do this podcast, because when you and I spoke the second time, and I'm like, I don't think, well, we take for granted, right, what we do. And I think what you've done is extraordinary, but you might not remember it all the time until someone tells you, or people. And I want to recognize that. I want you to understand that I spend all day, every day, mostly with people. People don't hire a coach unless they're struggling, right? Most people won't spend the money. The company won't spend the money but when people are paying me their own money, usually they're at some kind of crossroads, and they don't know what to do. And oftentimes it is the inability to trust self, trust the universe, God, whatever they believe is the thing bigger than them. And so it really is an amazing lesson, right? Because you could have done what a lot of people do, which is anchor into, I have to sell the honey for money, which is super small thinking. But for a lot of people, that would have been good enough thinking, right? They would have muscled through it. They would have not listened. And so, I mean, look at what you've done, right? Like you've created something that is for generations is going to make a difference.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, there was, and more of that research of like, well, what's going on? Like, I'm asking the bees for help and talking to them, like that's wild and weird, and like, who's this crazy lady? But then I started like looking into it more, and there is an ancient practice called the asking and telling with bees, and it's ancient. So it's been happening for generations. And I'm like, am I living through some deep lineage stuff going on here? Like a lot of the European cultures had different practices related to ancient beekeeping. And one of them was the asking and telling of working with bees. And so that was pretty cool to stumble upon that. And when I realized that, I went into that further shamanic training, and I flew to England and studied at a school there that works with the Melissa training. And it's shamanic beekeeping pretty much, or it's the rituals related to that. And that practice has been really important for me. That asking and listening practice is just, yeah, it's helped a lot. But thank you. Yeah, I really don't think that I'm in control of it that much. I think that when, if someone wants to go and like you said, like do the honey thing and they didn't really hear the call, I think that the bees are the ones, I'm just an extension of their colony. And that's what I think is so sophisticated about them and magical in some aspects, is like, I'm a worker bee, but I'm kind of in this adult, a human form. Am I an adult? No. I'm in a human form, but they're like using me as well as for their whole intelligent organism. And I'm just like an extension. And I like to believe that, and maybe that's like a human view, like on another species, but I feel like we're really not that separate, especially if we can really humble ourselves and get on a very deep level, that we can kind of interact maybe with less separateness, that we can really, coexist with animals in a different way.
Yeah, maybe you were going to talk about this, so I don't want to disrupt if you have a place you want to go. But at some point, I want you to talk about how you know when you're in the flow with the bees versus what are the indicators, right? Like, what are you paying attention to?
Yeah. So, yeah, I think about this a lot when I'm working with bees. It has a lot to do, I think, with my state, like where I am with the regulated nervous system, how I'm feeling that day. Sometimes I don't even want to go into a beehive if I've had like a funny morning or an argument with my child or something. I need to be like in a very like peaceful, kind of receptive state. And I don't honestly feel like one with them that much, I will say. I hope that I will feel that more and more as I grow, but there's been a handful of times in my life where I started working with the bee colony, opening them up, and I felt one with them. And what does that feel like? It feels like they're communicating what they want, and my mind is completely blank and I'm erased. Like I don't think about, oh, I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to do this. I'm just operating as an extension of them, and my mind is quiet, and like they're kind of communicating in their own highly intelligent way of how I can help them. And that's really like the next level of where I'm trying to get to every time I open the colony. Yeah. And I feel like they do that too on an esoteric level too. It doesn't have to be like on working on the inside of their hive. It's more also like on that esoteric, that global level as well. So I'm really more excited about that more broad level.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm just imagining when you told me like 4-year-old kids, that's the youngest.
Yeah, I've 4-year-old is the youngest, field trip that we offer.
And the kids, The kids probably behave better than the adults, most likely, I would imagine.
Yeah, a lot of times, yeah, I think that they're really receptive to the bees and are naturally, have when they hear that sound, they're not afraid. They don't have that like pre-registered fear of them.
Mhm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Um, so I met you talking about retreats, and if you remember me telling you, we found the location of our retreat because of your retreat online before we ever stepped foot on the Big Island, which I thought was so amazing. Then when I met you unplanned, so let's talk about that. These retreats where you are also inviting other people to come and, spend like a week with you doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. So we just offered our first retreat last January. And it's a women's retreat. It's 5 days, 5 nights, 6 days. And we call it more of like a training. It has the level of retreat in it because we're in a beautiful place and we're eating amazing food, and there is a deep relaxation and healing element to it, but we're also training women to become bee guardians, as we like to say it, beekeepers, bee guardians. And we will work with bees every day, as long as the weather cooperates, and we'll kind of introduce and allow women to create their own relationship with bees, because I believe that every person has a different relationship with a colony. And a major part of our retreats are working with the bees, as well as doing shamanic and rituals related to the Melissa tradition, which is a European tradition, and also some of the wise women traditions, which are some people called it witch traditions and things like that. So we integrate the ceremony with the beekeeping, and we also are reenacting what it would be like to be in the past civilizations of women working together with bees, and kind of enacting what it would be like if we were all operating under one mind, or one, we call it the hive mind, one consciousness. And it is profound, because in order to operate as a hive mind or a deep sisterhood, you have to really let go a lot of the ego and a lot of the things that hold you back from, you create separateness, right? As a person, as an individual, it's a natural thing. We're born with, we're not born with it, but we learn this separateness really early on. And so coming together as women and coming together, working with bees, which they operate as one organism, and then we're reenacting that as a group. Whew, there's a lot of healing that comes through it. And it really is a deep healing, because it's a unified energy and a unified field. And it realizes that we're really not separate, and we can move mountains as women together. And we have, and we will. And a part of this, doing this retreat again, was that the asking and listening, the listening and telling of the bees. And I said, I really want to teach people. I've been teaching adults for a long time, but when I talk about the spiritual aspects or the shamanic aspects of bees, I feel like I want to cater to those people who really want this, not people who are like, okay, I just want to learn beekeeping and put them on my farm. And I am happy to do that, but I really felt like this call of, I want to go into the rituals. I want to go into the deep practices and weave them together as the ancient women did. And so we were able to do that. We have a number of amazing instructors, and we have a musician that also works with us in the retreats. So yeah, it's been exciting. And
what's the musician doing? I need to hear.
The musician is Mary Isis. She's a dear friend of mine. She's this amazing ceremonialist woman who does ceremony all over the continent, all over the world. And she comes in and she basically soothes us with her voice. And we do a lot of voice activation and voice healing at night. She just brings this very element of like high energy healing through a voice. And she holds ceremony space really well. So she was one of my co-facilitators, and I really enjoyed working with her. And she's just one of the most beautiful humans I know.
You just said so many important things, and I want to put a pin in a few. So for the men listening and watching, a few minutes ago, Jenny said some things, and I'm thinking, like, I was collecting them, and I'm like, what are the things we might need to pause and double click on so that people actually get some new expanded learning? And let me just create an umbrella and say that I think that for those of us who have grown up in cities and grown up in, paved places that are very disconnected from indigenous practices and tribal knowledge, much of that is a mystery to people, which is also why I think words like witch, by the way, for some people is just about Halloween. Like they don't really understand women's circle. And so I'm not just saying to anyone here who's a man listening, watching, and I don't care what year it is, because this is going to live forever. I want to educate, and for the men and women listening and watching who don't have an understanding around some of the things that Jenny was talking about. And I know that because I do retreats here in Los Angeles, and we do silent retreats, we do meditation retreats, we teach people practices that for many people are completely foreign, but they're very ancient. And, having a women's circle, for instance, for many women and men that I have met through the years who live in cities and very disconnected, like I said, from indigenous practice, they don't understand that unless we really stop and say, people lived in tribes. The women were the caretakers of the fire. They were the caretakers collectively as a village of everything that was going on that wasn't fighting or hunting. So it was the man's role, and from about age 13, right, coming of age, that the boys and the men were off doing other things appropriately, because that's what they did in their societies, whatever that meant. Sometimes it was also harvesting food and taking care of animals, but the women's role was, first of all, together, all generations of women in a very tightly knit village, right? Like I said, keeping the fire, sharing resources, raising children, like you said, maybe beekeeping, maybe all the things that needed to be done to keep this part of their society together. It also meant celebrating. It meant ritual. It meant all the things that could most likely in societies before organized religion came in and organized government took over a lot of those societies. The women also were the keepers oftentimes of the medicine and of the spiritual philosophy, the astrology, right? The timekeeping, all of those things. So I just wanted to make sure everybody understood, because you were talking about it and I'm thinking there's a lot of people here who might not even understand why women from here would sign up for a retreat to go do all of that. And I think it's amazing. And I think it's more people than most people realize, actually, who are getting called back to the land. So I think it was why I was so excited to see what you were doing and not surprised at all. But I do think some people will misunderstand it. And I think that's the opportunity we have, right? To make it less foreign, less scary, and help maybe everybody remember.
Exactly. I think that's a really good, it is a thing to take account. So that word witch is and I don't like to use that word because that was in the time of history when the wise women were people in civilizations who were the medicine women, were the healers, were the midwives, were the beekeepers, were the brewers. They had maybe intuition powers. They knew the seasons really well. They were earth women in societies, and they were, like you said, they worked together and they were helping their village and the children. And there was a point in history, and correlates to organized religion, the witch persecutions, where there was a shift from wise woman to witch. And I think about this a lot, and it's not that we're doing, wow, they've really painted that picture that we're evil if we practice witchcraft, or witchcraft can be gardening, witchcraft can be beekeeping. It is not evil to work with the earth. That is, the closest place, one of my favorite.
Well, like you said, yeast, beer, everybody.
Yeah.
Bread.
Yeah, the women have been involved in this forever. And I think, and I talked to a friend about it. I'm like, well, why, how can that have happened? They killed hundreds and hundreds of thousands of women for practicing things that kept their civilization alive and thriving. And women had the trades. They were doing a lot of the work, and I'm not here to say one is better than the other, men versus women. It's not about that, but it's a really sad picture that there was that turn from wise woman to witch. And now, even today, if I tell my mom that I want to practice wise women traditions and she's a Christian, she thinks I'm demonic. And it's like, I don't see it that way. I see that I'm an earth child and I'm connecting to the earth, and I love to have a little ritual, and it's my way of being spiritual with it. And it's not separate in this, like, it's not the way that they portray it, I guess, and like how it's portrayed.
100%. And I'm glad you said that. And I am so excited for people to listen and hear this, because, I've been saying a lot. We have a host of different clients, and big companies, small companies, etc. One of the things that I'm sad to report, everybody, is that organizations that have a lot of women together are not always working in sisterhood. Let me just say that there's a lot of competition there, and the framework around our modern society, I think, is at a point where it has to shift, and it has to come back to what you're talking about, Jenny. So take away the language, everybody, the language that might trigger you, the words that might feel weird. We need women to know how to come together and know how to caretake together, right? Earth keepers, the keeper of your corporate culture. Like, I can talk about like this at work, and sit with a group of women who, because they don't know how to interact with each other, cause dysfunction that perpetrates a story for a very long time that kept women out of the workplace, that kept women from being promoted, etc. So as I work on one side of my business, trying to help evolve the modern workplace, this is like a pillar. I feel like it's the most important thing. And people always look at me when I use language, Jenny, like, healing the womb space. That's not normal language in a company.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I can do it in retreats, because the people who show up for those are ready and not afraid of that language. But to me, sooner or later, we have to bring it all back to understand that womb space energy is the creation energy. So whether that's, creating a child, but that energy is also the energy we need to innovate, everyone. It is the energy that we use to shift and change sustainably anything. And I mean, I think that the work that you're doing, I mean, my next question was have you done one with men yet? Like, are you going to do it with men? Do you think that's going to be different? Like, I want to know.
Yeah, well, I would love to do one with men, and I would love to do one with couples too. But unfortunately, like, I was trained by women with the Melissa practice in Europe. And I don't think that this tradition I would have to ask my teachers if that would be allowed, because Melissa tradition is very different. It was passed down from mouth to ear for, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. So I don't want to be the person to change traditions unless I am allowed to, and I'm not really pushing that envelope right now. And I also don't think that there's anything wrong with women coming together and men coming together and us all coming together. Like that does not, I don't feel like we need to be threatened that people who identify as women come together and people who identify as men come together, and we do our separate things and then we come together and it's even better. So, and on that note too, like there is one reason of wanting to enact these retreats or kind of re-enliven them through like the past into the moment, is because I really feel like we're switching out of this highly patriarchal energy and going into more of a feminine energy. And I think this isn't just my thinking. I think it's like a prophesized thing 100%. And we all feel it.
Just so you know, it's anybody who's listening, and if this is your first time, I am completely aligned with that. The way I say it is the evolution of all of our systems, but just so you know, the workplace, because it is patriarchal. I call it hierarchical. It's tradition. It has all of those components in it. And I'm completely aligned. So keep going. But I just wanted you to know I totally align with
thank you. So and I don't believe that, I think the balance is what we really need, right? A balance of feminine and patriarchalness. It's like this, we want a balance. So, but as we shift more into this feminine energy right now, I feel like people are feeling that it's good to kind of, I can see how we really need to change things and kind of deconstruct what's in business and deconstruct organizations, because there is this whole top down energy. And if we look at like women in their true essence or feminine in their true essence, I don't feel like that's really our true essence from a top down energy. And this maybe want to be cut out, Gus, I don't know. But this part is where I want to say about the feminine energy is, what's really great about working with bees is they are predominantly a female organism. So they have a queen, a colony of bees work together as one unit, as one family unit. There's 3 insects in the world that build colonies: ants, termites, and honeybees. And all other insects are individual and work together and mate, but they don't have the masses of individuals. So honeybees can have anywhere from 20 to 80,000 bees. And they all work together as one family. One queen usually in one colony, and she lays eggs, which therefore become her daughters, maidens, worker bees. And the majority of the colony are the worker bees, who are sterile females, and they are doing the majority, like their name, worker bee, gathering food, attending to the next generation of bees, building wax, protecting the colony, and so forth. And the queen is laying egg after egg after egg, thousands of eggs, 1,000 eggs a day. So it's this highly matriarchal society. There are males that come in at different, the queen will lay male drones, and they're usually born around the mating seasons. And so, but they're not there all the time, and they're only, they're like maybe a few percent, 10% drones. So this is like this very, female society. So it's interesting.
Where do they go when they're not when they're not there doing their job? Where are they? What's happening?
Well, they're not there all year long, because they're not being they're not being initiated by the queen being, so they're there. When they are there, they're hanging out in the colony, keeping the brood warm. They're not necessarily, the common science is that they don't do any of the jobs of working, but there's more and more like evidence that we're seeing that they provide warmth, and that they are main, I guess, role is to mate with queens of different hives, or different colonies. So they fly out on the daily practice on sunny days and go into these, they call them drone congregations. So there's many different drones from different colonies congregating in the sky, and virgin queens will fly through these drone congregations, and they will mate, the queen will mate from anywhere from 12 to 30 different drones in her mating flight, and hold the semen in her body for her whole life. She'll live up to 5 years. So they're in that role, they are there. There's amazing literature from Jacqueline Freeman that the drones hold the song of increase, and they hold a spiritual connection. And I do believe that, but from a scientific perspective, that's what we see drones as. The cool thing and interesting about drones is their exact genetic copy of the queen. So the drones are not really, they're not there to, they never mate inside the colony. They're mating with queens of different colonies. And so that queen is that drone is holding the queen's genetics in their male body, and then they're mating with different queens. And so their queen genetics are moving amongst the landscape. And it's just, it's just mind blowing because it's like, it's, yeah.
Okay, but I want to see the drones. I want to see it all like that. Like right now I'm like, what? Like this is a whole part of the world that we're clueless about.
Yeah.
And it's so important. That's the thing, right? Like people joke because there was that movie. Do you remember Jerry Seinfeld was in the movie, and he was a bee animated movie, and it was about bees.
Yeah. And it was, yeah, it was a Disney movie, I believe. And it's very, yeah, there's many things that are not right about it, but it was really comical, but it's not factual at all.
Well, yeah. But besides that, like I did think for a blip, it raised awareness because my kids would say all the time, the bees are dying at an alarming rate.
They are. Yeah.
So
yeah.
something stuck there, but I don't want to trivialize this because I do feel like, again, you don't know, you don't know. And like what you're doing is not only reviving, carrying on ancient practice with what you're doing, but I think that there's so much to learn in the process about yourself, about not just you, but anyone who comes to be educated, goes to the retreat. Like, as you were explaining it to me, even the first time we spoke, I'm like, everybody should do that.
Yeah, I think if they're interested in beekeeping, you should do it. And also if you want to just have a unique way to experience something different and come with a sense of wanting to maybe heal or to have a deeper sisterhood or feel connected to sisters and raise up the divine feminine energy naturally as the bees do, is really my mission. Is that the bees are already enacting this divine feminine energy, if we want to say. And what's so beautiful about them, which I think, you asked me a question, what's special about the bees? And I feel that they live their life working together, and then they get their food and forage on flowers. Imagine like living off of flowers, just like that, seeing flowers every day and eating them and sharing them and making honey and collecting pollen. And that's their livelihood, right? They're living off of flowers and making food for the next generations. But what's also so beautiful about their livelihood is because they're such beautiful, aligned, harmonic creatures, that they are making the world more abundant and more fertile. So naturally, in what they do is making the rest of their environment more beautiful, more fertile, having food for us, and like perpetuating the flowers for the next generation. And I think that even if you're like not a beekeeper, if we can be around that energy and learn from that vibration as human species, imagine like the next level of work in your field, or the next, your next business, or how you're going to propel your business, because that's really like living in harmony with the planet. If we can like have a livelihood and it perpetuates like even more than just our business, and it makes it more beautiful and abundant for the rest of the world, including like the healthier earth. So I just find that amazing, that their livelihood is really making things more beautiful and more abundant.
Yeah.
For the rest of everybody.
Right. They exist to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good. We're not taking anything out here. It's so good. Like you don't know. I'm telling you, there are so many times now that I'm sitting in a corporate meeting or a board meeting or an executive meeting, and I'm thinking, what metaphor, what analogy, like who can help me teach these people a better way to behave? And oftentimes, some of the most profound lessons are just sitting there in nature waiting for us,
Mhm.
just going so fast.
Yeah. We're not separate from it, that's for sure.
Oh
So
my gosh, right.
realizing how much we are integrated in it is really a really amazing feeling. Yeah. And I hope people don't get triggered by the word magic and things like that, because magic is just could be any special thing in your daily interaction that feels aligned or expanded in any way. But it's just, I really enjoy living more of a magical life. Like I want to live the most magical life possible. And I think that yeah, removing that ego and realizing that we're not separate from the earth and the plants and each other, your work team, you're not separate, maybe from someone you really don't like we might have these separate bodies, but really like we're really connected, and maybe that will give you a little bit more compassion for each other. And that's what we really need, is more compassion. So yeah, if we can enact and be inspired by the bees and how they work together as a unified consciousness, I think that we will evolve our species at a very, very rapid rate. And it won't just be our species, we'll actually do better for the earth. And that's really kind of that shift of feminine, going into that feminine nature right now. So yeah.
We need it. The clock is ticking, and I don't know if you've noticed, but sometimes it feels like we're going backwards, or I don't know what's happening. So don't watch the news.
Yeah. Try not to too much.
Yeah, I know we need to be done soon, but like, can we just talk a little bit about what you're planning for 2024 and what you're excited about?
Yeah, I'm excited. Well, I want to work a lot on myself. I guess it's been like this year and probably will be for the rest of my life. But this year and next year, I'm kind of going through a transformation. People would say it's like a midlife crisis. I don't like that at all. But like, I do feel like I'm starting to feel this shift. I've been working in education and schools as also a part-time consultant, and I'm kind of ready to branch out of that and put more energy into my nonprofit work and retreats. But I'm feeling a real urge to do some writing about wise women, and I'm being called to do that. And I also feel this deep urge to kind of slow way down. I used to be such a worker bee, produce, go, 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 go. And then I started to have some health issues because I think I was working myself too much. And being a mother really reset, like, wait a minute, what am I doing? Like, life's gonna, my child's gonna grow up and I'm gonna be just working. And that just was a big wake up call. So I think for the next year, I'm going to try to slow down, which I have been, and really enjoy the simple life more and more. Gardening, cooking nutritious meals, sweeping the floor, and integrating more ritual in my daily practice so that I can kind of have time to contemplate and reflect and bring some more ritual into the magic of the daily practice, which I love. I love watching my garden grow. I love feeding my cows. I love my chickens, and I just want to do more of that. So I'm trying to design my life to accommodate a simpler way of living, which feels very aligned for my mission on the earth, is to live a little more simple. I also feel excited about learning how to do more things. I live off grid, so I've been learning how to do my solar and repair water pumps when they break. And I'm enjoying it. If I did this 5 years ago, it used to stress me out and I used to cry for help. Any guy, come help me. Now I'm like, I'm going to figure this out. And just that shift in my mental state has really helped me to not stress out about the broken water pump and try to fix it. And when I do fix it, I'm like, yeah, here we go. I feel so empowered and I learned something, and I feel like that knowledge will carry forth. If I keep farming and keep living off grid, I'll know what's wrong with that one issue because I dealt with it. And so, yeah, in the long story short, I just want to keep doing what I'm doing and not doing the hustle and bustle as much. So maybe Coach Chris can help me figure that out more.
This is why I'm bringing people to the Big Island in the fall, and I'm sure in the future it'll be more like you. I do want to get to co-ed groups. Actually, I'm just going to try and crack the code of what the right medicine is for everybody. But I think part of my new purpose is that taking people who have been living mostly in corporate environments, myself included, which is it's never been sustainable, Jenny. The pace that we've forced upon ourselves and the structures that we've, like I said, to me, this is evolution of the workplace while I'm helping the humans be okay with slowing down. To your point, I just last week I did a LinkedIn Live about slowing down so you can actually go faster, because in most businesses the pace is just, it's always been unsustainable, but now it's crazy, which is why everybody thinks we need AI to figure out our problems. And I'm like, time out people.
Yeah.
Let's slow down. Let's actually talk to each other. Let's take care of ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing that's great about living on these islands is that it is a slower pace. I mean, there's fast-paced cities, in Honolulu and things like that, but there's definitely a slower pace, I think. And if you're not used to that slow pace, it might be hard to be here, but things move slower. It's kind of just, kind of common knowledge for a lot of us residents here. And we're okay with it. And sometimes it's frustrating when you're waiting for a permit for your house but there's a lot of goodness in that slowness too, and a lot of acceptance. So yeah, that's interesting. I think that it's always not been sustainable, but it's been the norm, like you said, in corporate environments for so long. So
well, and cities, we could do a whole other podcast. Maybe we should. And to me, something I'm saying to people a lot is that, because people often say to me, oh my gosh, you go to Hawaii all the time. I'm like, okay, I know I have to go there to reset my nervous system because it's impossible to do here.
mm-hmm.
There's just too many distractions. There's too much pollutants that we're all just used to.
Mm-hmm.
And until you go someplace where the air is pure, where the sound level comes down exponential notches, right? Like it doesn't just come down one or two, specifically Big Island, which is, different than the other islands, which I love, but very different, like Maui to the Big Island, completely different experience. And I mean, I think where you are is very special. And we have to protect it, by the way, because we can't bring too many people there at once. We do have to protect it, and we do have to. I'm grateful sometimes being in places off grid, because it makes you start to see yourself, in ways that you can't when you're worried about your Wi-Fi and the next notification on your phone, and it's crazy.
Yeah.
Or bees.
I don't take it for granted. I really, even just growing up here, I do realize that it's a privilege to live here, and it's shaped who I am, and I just want to make it better as best as I can, just like how the bees do. So yeah, it's a good reflection, and it's a good reflection that if we are going to be creating things and businesses, and like that ebb and flow of creativity isn't constant. Like it's not always in that creative mode. You have to have that incubation yin energy as well. And I feel like when you ask that question, what's your next year look like? I'm like, I'm in my incubation time. Like I'm not on the, like the crazy productivity mode. And I'm excited about that because incubation time and the yin energy is just as productive as the yang. And I feel that they go so hand in hand, obviously, but getting a relationship with accepting it is a whole different thing, because the rest of America and even people around me are operating so much quicker and have so much more than me sometimes, or whatever, I live really simple, but I think that I'm just happy with being in the incubation time, and I know though that it will change too. So yeah.
It's beautiful. I just want to say thank you to you. I know, and I don't know that you can know, but I anticipate that this is going to create a lot of conversation that's going to be incredibly not just positive. I think people are going to learn a lot. So I'm really grateful for you taking the time. I'm very excited about us potentially working together for some retreats. So I can't wait to bring small, intimate groups there so that we can learn more from you. So,
Yeah, I'm excited to work with you too. I think we're going to have a special time being in nature and activating some energy together. So I'm excited.
yay.
Yeah.
Okay, and we will, everybody listening and watching, we will put the links below where you can find Jenny, her retreats, her education programs. So yeah, all that goodness.
Come to Hawaii and hang out with some bees with us. And yeah, I promise you'll enjoy it.
Great.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chris. And I'm so excited to see you here on the islands when you do come in person.
All right. Thanks, everybody.